Good morning, everyone. If I can have your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, please. Good morning, everyone. If I can have your attention, please. Welcome. Before we begin, I'm just going to ask if you have a cell phone, if you could just take the cell phone, either turn it off or put it on the vibrate mode, we would appreciate it. And we'll be starting the service by doing the Kriya ritual with the family. Then we'll be having the honor guard, and then Chaplain Judy Henn will be officiating the service for Irving Gareleck. Thank you.
Grant peace, goodness, and blessing, grace, kindness, and mercy to us and to all your people. Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha, sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael Amecha. Sim shalom, sim shalom. A life well lived is a precious gift of hope and strength and grace from someone who has made our world a brighter, better place. It's filled with moments sweet and sad, with smiles and sometimes tears, with friendships formed and good times shared, a laughter through the years. A life well lived is a legacy of joy and pride and pleasure, a loving, lasting memory our grateful hearts will treasure. Death has taken our beloved Irving Gareleck. The world is a little darker, and we grieve his loss. In the midst of our sorrow, may the presence of loving family and friends be a great comfort. Irving's love united us in life, and death cannot break that bond. We shared his companionship during his life, and that continues through the tenderness of memory. The gifts of his heart and mind brought us joy and happiness and are now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we turn to our sacred scriptures, which brings us the message of God's nearness, tells of our connection to the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. And so please join me in reciting the 23rd Psalm. You can find it inside your service leaflet. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. At this time, I would like to invite Sarah Schultz to come up. She's going to share a song with us.
Maybe I don't need to go up and use the microphone. I'm going to give you the words in case I mess them up. So I have an unusual request, but Irving was a very unusual man. So this song is so full of joy and love. How could we not sing it, right? So if you know the chorus, or any part of it, of all the gals I've known, and I've known some,
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Uncle Irving would have loved that. I'm told that was his favorite song, so he would have loved it. Thank you. Usually, when I do a funeral, I say something about how difficult it is to get up and speak about a loved one when you're grieving. Well, I think it's an indication of the kind of life that my Uncle Irving lived, that so many people want to come up and share some thoughts about him. But first, I'm going to bring a microphone down to my Aunt Claire, and she's going to share some thoughts.
It's going to stand and turn around.
Absolutely.
Not that I need to walk.
How about if I hold mine?
Okay. Times have changed. I wrote this several weeks ago, and I asked him if he wanted to hear it. He said, no, just tell me what it says, so I did. If you were here, you knew him. If you knew him, you loved him. If you knew him, you know he was a man of great heart and integrity, in business and in otherwise. From time to time, he would say to me that he felt very happy and fulfilled. He said he didn't want anything more than he already has: a wonderful, loving family, 3 devoted daughters, wonderful grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and a wonderful wife. Lately, he's been saying that often. I think he wants to be remembered that way. So I'm passing that on to all of you. The world was a happy place when he was in it, and it's going to be very empty now. And then he added his own line. He said, my name is Irving Gareleck, and I approve this message. How's that one? The dogs are here because they were so important to him. There'll be a lot of dogs who will be looking for him forever. Some of them he'll see in heaven. Thanks. That's it.
Thanks, Aunt Claire. Next, we're going to hear from his daughters, Ellen, Betsy, and Nancy, his friends Joe Sturman and Tim Welch, and his grandchildren, Jeff Stevenson, Jared Picard, and Jamie Firestein. So, Ellen, Betsy, and Nancy, why don't you start? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if that person is here, they can come up.
Hi, thank you all for coming. Our Father, our King, that was the inscription on a tray we had made for my dad about 50 years ago, and that was how he was in our home. To say there was no one like him is an understatement. He was a man of great character and morals and so full of life and vigor. And to survive in a home with 4 women like us, he followed one simple rule that seemed to work pretty well for him. His answer to every request we had was negative. And it seems pretty funny today, but it wasn't such fun being at the receiving end of that answer all those years ago. And thankfully, we could usually get a more positive response from our mom, so it taught us to stop asking our dad, which at the end of the day was probably his plan all along. His favorite times was when he was in motion. He had always been an athlete and a fighter, and my sons look at his approach to life as inspiring and admirable. Skiing was his favorite activity, and trying to stay out on the slopes as long as he wanted us to was always the challenge of skiing with him. When he came to Aspen, I used to set him up with my friends so I could ski but not have to stay out as long as he did. And he was still skiing with me at 92 years old, so gracefully it was a joy just to watch him. Not to mention he was wearing a ski jacket from 30 years ago with duct tape on his gloves and skis and boots that were usually hand-me-downs from my son Jason. And I think everyone that's here knows my dad pretty well. He lived a long and active life, and even with cancer, he kept skiing and going to the gym and cutting the lawn till he just couldn't do it anymore. He just bought a new drive-on lawnmower about 2 months ago because the old one from the dark ages had finally died. And he would drive around and cut the lawn about 5 times a week just to feel like he could still do something and be out in nature. And then he would rest the remaining of the day. And the fact that he lasted so long was a testament to his tenacity and his sheer desire to live. He wanted for nothing. When asked about his dying, he said he wasn't afraid to die, and there was nothing he regretted about his life. He did everything he wanted to do, and his needs were simple. He was leaving his family well provided for and couldn't feel more loved and supported than he did having us all there these last 6 months. Our dogs are here today because they brought my father so much pure joy, entertainment, and comfort. He talked about them daily, and they laid with him on his bed to the very end. I know how you live your life says so much about a person, but how you face your death and continue to live your life is an even truer example of who he was. My dad accepted his dying, but was up for trying anything he could to live. He lived well, he laughed often, and he loved much, and he was respected by everyone who knew him and loved by his family and friends. He leaves this world a better place and gave the best he had, and he is deeply ingrained in all of us, and I don't imagine a day will go by that he isn't remembered and his loss isn't felt. Dad, you will always be our hero, and your love forever will be imprinted on our hearts.
Great.
Thank you.
You will hear from my sisters how coming to their homes in Colorado to ski became his favorite vacation spots. But I was the one who introduced my dad to the greatest passion in life, skiing. I used to complain that Teddy Davis would ski with Debbie and Cy Jacobs would ski with Randy. Why wasn't my dad skiing? So, in my father's fashion, he got some used skis and boots, and off he went. And by off he went, I meant straight down the hill, because, of course, at that time, he wouldn't hear of paying for lessons. And as he went whizzing by me, he hollered out, "Hey, Bets, how do I stop?" My dad persevered and became a beautiful skier and skied with such passion. My friends Mark and Mariana gave him a nickname years ago, and to this day, they call him Flash. As I look around the room and when I read the comments so many people have made to us, they are all the same. My dad was an extraordinary guy. His love of life was infectious, and he believed he was indestructible, if only that were true. My father was always there to help others. He was endlessly selfless in this fashion. He was the last man still driving and would pick up their friends and take everyone wherever they needed to go. He was the guy you called if you needed anything. Everybody he knew loved him. He was fun to be with, and his ski buddies loved and respected him. He loved having us around, and it meant so much to him that we were there. One of us was there almost every day, most of the last 6 months. A day hadn't gone by. I guess we really already said that. As hard as this has been on all of us, it has also been the greatest gift of our lives. People talk about how hard it had been, but I think we all agree it was the easiest and most rewarding experience of our lives. Nothing could be more important than this. My dad once said he wanted to leave this world by kissing his family goodbye and skiing down the hill. Hopefully that is exactly what he is doing now. We love you, Dad, and we are going to miss you terribly. Thank you for being you, and may you finally rest in peace.
No, leave it. That's mine. That's mine. My sisters have already shared many of my thoughts And that's really the best legacy that my parents could leave. The three of us are in sync, and for the most part, we're on the same page. As a matter of fact, when the nurses woke Nancy and said, "Your father might have drawn his last breath," her first comment was, "No, he can't. I have to call my sisters." We've had a lifetime of loving each other, starting in the home provided for us by our parents and continuing to this day across the miles. Being at home these last few months is a gift for which we will always be grateful. My dad's love for his family extended seamlessly to my husband Ray, his boys, our daughters-in-law, and our grandchildren. In the Stevenson family, my folks are known as Great Claire and Great Irv, apt names for them both. And I know that none of the Stevensons will ever be on a ski slope again and not feel my father's presence, insisting on starting earlier in the morning, skiing faster, and taking one more run before heading home for a glass of wine, preferably his own. And it's not just family who will miss my father. Wherever he went, he was loved, admired, and respected. I can barely remember a time when friends of mine did not turn to me and say, "Your father is my hero. I want to be just like him when I grow up." Clearly, my father lived his life until he couldn't. As I was leaving to go back to Florida 2 weeks ago, not expecting to be back quite this soon, I thanked my father for everything he had ever done for us and everything he had given us. He always said that his father had left him off better than he had been, and he always hoped that he could do the same for us. I told him I was in absolute awe of the life that he had led and created. And he turned to me and he said, "Well, the answer to that is very simple. I never wanted for anything more than what I had." My father was clearly the most satisfied man I have ever known, and he left this world such a better place. Some of you might have heard that the hospice staff had great difficulty dealing with my father. They couldn't get him to settle down. And they said it's often because there is something unresolved, such as pain or fear or an emotional conflict. But finally, my father settled down, so I know in my heart he was waiting for Nancy Pelosi to announce that they were finally going to have impeachment hearings. Helen Keller once said, "What we have once enjoyed deeply, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us." My father will forever be a part of so many. Alava Shalom, Daddy. Rest in peace.
Joe Sturman, Tim Welch.
Yesterday, or Wednesday, I got a call from Claire asking me if I would like to say a few words today. And I was very happy that I could do that. And as I heard Claire speak and Irv's three daughters, they said almost everything that is important to be said. So I think I'll talk about myself. How did I get blessed to become a special friend of Irv Gareleck's? Well, as you can see on the sides here, skiing was the key, which I didn't know at the time, but I started skiing, and Irv was one of the group that we skied with, maybe 20 people, on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Holiday Valley. Tuesday was Men's Day. $6 was a ticket, gave you lunch and a lesson. So we would go also on Thursday, which was Ladies' Day. So this was about 50 years ago, and I was not that great a skier, never became the greatest skier, But we had a wonderful time. And that's how we started out, and we became friends. And then we became special friends. How do you become special friends? Become special friends when your families become friends. And I became part of their family. They became part of my family. On Wednesday morning, I got a call from my daughter in Chicago, and she was crying. And she asked me if I heard about Uncle Irv. And I said no. And then she said that my granddaughter Allison published a picture of Uncle Irving, on Facebook, and that's how she knew. And then my daughter Ellen called me to see if I knew. And then I got a call from my grandson in Dallas, and he left a message saying how sad he feels about Uncle Irving. And it just got to me. I don't know how, but anyway, I said goodbye to Irving at the end of August. I called up Claire and I said, is Irving able to have company? She said yes. So I came over, and when I walked in, he stood up from his recliner and we hugged each other. And I thought to myself, this is hard. How do I sit down with a friend and talk about the times we had together? Usually the cliche is the good times and the bad times. But with Irving, somehow there was only good times. So I was sitting there laughing and talking about the old times and what we did and how we did it and who we did it with, and inside I was crying. But Irving told me never to talk too long. But I will say that Irving's life was like he skied. He looked for the most challenging run that would prove to him how challenge, and he would go that way in life. But what made him exceptional was that he always was looking out for the person skiing with him. If they needed help, if they had a problem, he was there for them. So a person who led his life like this can't be compared to anybody, and I'm so happy that I call him my special friend.
Yeah, I've known Irving for probably 40 years. Started out, he was a customer of mine, and actually kind of intimidated me. And I thought he was really tough, and as things got going, he had a big job that was a parking ramp, and I had sold him some stuff, so I figured, this is gonna be easy. And I walked in, and he said to me, you know, your competitor was here about 2 hours ago with 2 dozen donuts and a better price. And this is a big job, and you're really going to have to work for this one. And I just looked so sad, and he said to me, come on, you're going to get the order. Just go get me the price. And that was kind of the beginning of a relationship that we had. He talked about when he first got into the plumbing business, he used to, I guess they lived on the east side, and they used to take their pipe with a trolley car. And him and his father one of them would get on the trolley car and open 2 windows, and the other one would be on the outside and hand him the pipe, and then he would run around and get in the trolley, and they would hold the pipe and go to their job and, you know, do whatever they had to do and come back that night. He went from being, you know, a 1 or 2 man shop to one of the biggest plumbing contractors in Western New York. And I think how he really did it was with integrity. You know, he had customers that just never left him. You know, everybody else would have to bid a job, and with Irving, they would just kind of call him up and say, come on over, and You know, it's yours. He said one of his best customers was General Mills. They had a huge water main break, and he showed up with his crew, everybody, in the middle of the night, and the guy said, we have a new policy, and we have to sign contracts, and I don't know if I can pay you, and you're gonna have to go through the bidding process. And Irving said to him, you know, I'm here to minimize the damage. It doesn't matter what it costs, I'm not gonna charge anything. You're my friend. And that's how Irving did business, and that's how he became super competitive. One day I said to him, where's the A. Gareleck come from? Because everything, you know, is A. Gareleck. And he said, well, I was in the phone book, and if you're the first plumber in the phone book, they call you first. So I went and looked in the phone book, and all of a sudden there's an ABC contractor. So he said the only way I could get ahead of him is to put another A in front of the A. Gareleck. And he was always thinking, you know, when it came to cars, he could have bought any car that he wanted. But what he did was he took his skis and he went to the dealerships and he found the Dodge Caravan with I think they had the extended body, and he could put his keys in the Dodge Caravan and not have to put them on the top. So that was his vehicle of choice. He always loved Buffalo. He talked about Buffalo. He said it's the one place. There was one day where he could go skiing in the morning and go and play golf in the afternoon. And I think he always, you know, that was something that he just loved about this area. His other big thing was Bridgewater Country Club. We were talking about it, and I guess he was probably a member for 50 years. They used to have a big, I guess, Olympic-sized swimming pool, and they used to have tennis courts, and Irving would play with the assistant pro golf in the morning, and then he would play with the assistant pro for tennis, and then he would go swimming, and then the family and the daughters and Claire would all go out for dinner. But that was such an important part of his life. He used to brag about how he used to help Rocco, who was the pro, plant all the trees in the course. So I'd hit the ball behind a tree, and he'd go, you know, I planted that tree 40 years ago. I played with him for at least probably 10, 12 years. He never bought a golf ball. He kept finding balls, and he kept putting them in his bag. And then when the guy came out to put his bag on the cart, and it's like he was really struggling, then Irving would know it was time to take the balls out of the bag and take them home and put them in the garage, I assume, or the basement. I think he's probably got hundreds and hundreds of balls put away that he saved. My dad was in the plumbing business, and the plumbers were playing at Bridgewater. And the first year they played, you know, these are guys that play once, twice a year. So they get on the tee, and of course they rip up the whole tee. And Irving was in charge. The greenskeeper, I think, was the name that he was. So he refused to let him use the tees the next year. So my dad was good friends, and he was a really good golfer. And Irving said, okay, I'm giving you permission to use the tees, but none of these other plumbers are using the tees. Very generous person, but he always wanted to do it without people knowing, you know. If you needed something, there was absolutely no limit to what he would do for people. He always felt that, you know, what people thought of you after you passed is your reward for doing what's right when you're alive. And I think that was his philosophy, and he always helped people. Very generous, encouraged people to donate money. He was always go set up a stock fund and have it for a charity, and then the stocks can go up and you don't have to pay this and that, and he would go on, and I probably should do more of it than I ever have. One of his big things was at weddings. He said they used to have the dance where they would have how many years been married. And he was always the last one, he and Claire, and he really, that was very important to him, you know. And it was not only was the last one, he was the last one by 20 or 30 years, I guess. His daughters, he always talked about, they came to all of his doctor appointments. I'm sure he told them, don't come, I don't need you, but I appreciate it, but that's something that he talked about all the time, that he really was absolutely blown away, the fact that you took your time and you flew here and you were always with him. And that was extremely, extremely important to him. And I guess that's about it. He was a great friend. He was my mentor. He was always complaining about his golf game, you know, because when he was 40 years old, he used to get on the green in 2, and now it took him 3. And he really was an excellent golfer, but he just, you know, he was a very competitive person, but just a great person. I don't know anybody that can say a bad word about him, so that's it. Thank you.
Jeff, Jared, and Jamie. I see a pattern there, and Judy.
Hello. When my father married Ellen Gareleck, we got a new family. We got new grandparents, and I was fortunate enough to know her for 34 years. We vacationed, we traveled, we holidayed, but mainly we skied, and I was fortunate enough to ski with Claire and all of the grandchildren, and we just had a wonderful time. As everybody has said, Irv always wanted to be the first up on the mountain and the last to come down, which is exhausting, especially if you get 5 or 6 or 7 days a year. And so we would be so tired come lunchtime, and Irv would want to skip lunch, and we would beg him. And finally, since he realizes Stevenson's never miss lunch, he would succumb, and he would always order up at Midvale the clam chowder, which ranged from excellent to great, depending on the amount of clams in the soup. So it was always just about perfect. Irv liked to make you work when you were skiing. He'd let you warm up a little bit on the greens and blues, but always wanted to wind up on the bumps. Moguls, he always called them bumps. And so once we're through lunch and we head to the bump runs, I see him in his early 70s beating me. I see him in his early 80s beating me down the mountain. I see him in his early 90s beating me down the mountain. So, ego gets involved, and I pour the coals to it and make a couple good turns, and then all of a sudden I'm riding the top of a mogul, and then we get the windmills going and the poles going everywhere. And finally, when I come to rest, coming in way too hot in the valley with both of my ski tips pegged into the base of the next mogul that you could drive, it's the size of a VW. And if I was lucky enough to be on my skis and in my skis, I would turn over and look at Irv, and there he is, in control, with great balance, a smile on his face, and the bumps didn't bother him one bit. That's also how I saw him live, and I just think that we should all be that lucky. It's great to know him. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jared. I'm Irv's grandson and Nancy's son. And I'm just so happy to be able to hear all these stories and to share a little bit about my grandpa, who was a big inspiration to my brother and I throughout our whole lives. He was just so much fun to be with. The main inspiration and the main takeaway was sort of a joy for living. So on what turned out to be his last day, we knew it was close to being so. I wrote a note and I asked my mother to read it to him, and Grandma enjoyed it, so I'm just going to share that. It was essentially a poem, and I invite you to close your eyes and imagine Irving, which is what I did when I wrote it. You are safe, you are happy, you are home. You are free of all attachments from this lifetime. You are whole. You are peacefully resting, embraced by the love of Mother Nature, our true mother. Mother Earth takes our heavy energy and composts it into fresh new energy. Flowers bloom in the mud. It is time to return to the mud so that new flowers may bloom. Lay on the earth and feel its presence. Sink into the earth and rest. The time to rest is now. You are safe, you are whole, you are home.
This is a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh. A drop of rain falling on the ground disappears in no time at all, but is still there somehow. Even if it is absorbed into the soil, it's still there in another form. If it evaporates, it's still there in the air. It becomes vapor. You don't see the drop of rain, but that doesn't mean it's no longer there. It's like a cloud in the sky. When the cloud is no longer in the sky, it doesn't mean the cloud has died. The cloud is continued in other forms like rain or snow or ice. So you can recognize your cloud in his new forms. If you are very fond of a beautiful cloud, and if your cloud is no longer there, do not be sad. Your beloved cloud might have become the rain calling on you, "Darling, don't you see me in my new form?" Let this help you not be stuck in grief and despair. Your beloved one continues always. Try to recognize his continued presence in new forms. Our nature is the nature of no birth and no death. The nature of a cloud also. A cloud can never die. A cloud can become snow or hail or rain, but it is impossible for a cloud to pass from being into not being. A cloud cannot become nothing, and that is true with your beloved one too. He is not gone. He is continued in many new forms, and you can look deeply and recognize himself in you and around you.
I'm told that there was one more person who left a message, I think on Aunt Claire's phone, but did not say who it was. Was there one more person who wanted to come up and say something? Okay, I said I would ask. Thank you so much to all of you. So there's not a whole lot that I can add to that. As everyone has said, my Uncle Irving was a remarkable man who loved life. He welcomed family and friends into his home and into his heart. When I was a child, my dad would take me and my sister Cindy over to Aunt Claire and Uncle Irving's house every Sunday. We played with our cousins. We ate way too much food. We did craft projects, and we basked in the love of that family. They even let me come back after I brought my pet rabbit, and their dog Ginger ran around for days sniffing the closet where the rabbit had been. Those visits shaped my childhood in more ways than I can count, and I will always be grateful for the acceptance and the love. My sister Cindy, who could not be with us today, sends her love, and she asked me to thank him and Aunt Claire for always being a safe, loving place for her. Uncle Irving was a vigorous man well into his 90s. I remember him doing the Kazatsky, the Russian dance, at parties, maybe not in his 90s, but certainly well past his youth. Two instances particularly stand out in my mind. A few years ago, we were at a family bar mitzvah. It was either Adam's or Jordan's, I don't remember, but one of them. And he asked me to dance. Well, dancing with my Uncle Irving was always a highlight for me of any party. And it was a fast dance, a jitterbug. And at one point, he swiveled his hips and he did the squatting like this, like that. And I said to him, "Oh, Uncle Irving, I can't do that anymore. Your knees are better than mine." And he just beamed. Then, a couple of years ago, we were down in Florida celebrating my dad's birthday, and we were leaving Ellen's house to go see him. And so I went to put my suitcase, which, by the way, was not small, in the trunk of the car, and Uncle Irving grabbed it. And I said, "Oh no, Uncle Irv, I can do that." But he threw it in the trunk like it was a feather. This was a man in his 90s at the time. So I know that there are many, many more stories that we could tell, and we will, but not here. He will live on in the stories and the memories that we will share for the rest of our lives. May the memory of Irving Gareleck endure among us as a blessing. Let's take a few moments for some silent meditation as we bring into our hearts our memories of Irving and reflect on the impact he had on our lives. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. In the Jewish tradition, there's a prayer recited at funerals called El Malei Rachamim, which means compassionate God. It asks God to accept the soul of the departed and grant him eternal peace. And Sarah Schultz will come up and chant that for us now. If you are able, please rise for El Malei Rachamim. Do you need it?
I was gonna just chant over here. Oh, thank you.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amse Menucha Nechona, Tachas Konfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim, Utorim Kezaha Harakia, Mazihirim, Het Nishmat Yitzchak Ben Avram shalach leolamo Ba'al harachamim yasirehu beseter K'nefav leolamim V'yitzror hachayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Lord, full of mercy, who dwells on high, find fitting rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah, in the heights of the holy and pure, who shine like the glow of the firmament, for the soul of Irving Gareleck, who has gone to his eternal world. For we pray in memory of his soul, may his resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter him in the shelter of God's wings forever, and may God bind his soul in the bond of life. The Lord is his inheritance. May he rest peacefully upon his resting place, and let us say together, friends, Amen. The Mourner's Kaddish is a prayer which is recited in memory of those people who have passed on. It does not mention death, but is instead an affirmation of God's greatness. This prayer can also be found in your service leaflets. If it's your custom to recite Kaddish with the mourners, please rise. You're risen already. Please join me now. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach rute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye d'chal beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman karev v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah m'varach le'olam u'lamei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitchramam v'yitnaseh, V'yet hadar v'yet ala v'yet halal shmei d'kudusha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalom al rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu va'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May God grant peace to all who mourn, comfort all the bereaved among us, and let us say together, friends, Amen.
I'd just like to announce that the family has invited all the friends back to the Gareleck residence at 26 Berwyn Drive following our service. And all the other times for the other days are listed in your program, including a brief service Saturday evening at 7 p.m. at the family residence. That concludes this service. Thank you all for attending.